Yeah, I'm Gottam, working as senior machine learning engineer at Delivery Hero. And I used to drink coffee a lot in my mornings, but not anymore. I mean, yeah, that's a long story, but yeah, so I just drink nice tea, which still helps me a bit. And yeah, just kick off my day.
Yeah, hi. For my coffee, I don't drink coffee either. Never really got into caffeine, but what I've been drinking recently is these kind of like cold little yogurt drinks. With you a nice boost in the morning. But yeah, I'm Cole. I'm engineering manager at the logistics ML platform team in Delivery Go.
Hello, MLOps community. We're back for another podcast. I'm your host, Stefan. Today is not Demetrius. And I was talking to Gottam and Cole, which are both working at Delivery Hero. And for the people that don't know, Delivery Hero is started as a food delivery company, and now they operate in 70 plus countries. They own brands like Foodora and Foodpanda. And today we talked about, a feature store and how to build a feature store, but we also talked about the balance between centralized and decentralized solutions. DH Delivery Hero is a very interesting company as they also acquired a lot of different companies. So it's a very interesting use case. We also talked about the end of the free money. Before when you had a problem, you could just hire engineers. And nowadays it's a bit different. So we talked about that and the impact it has as well. And also mentioned when, ML platform teams don't work, sometimes having a global ML platform team might actually not work. And it might be better to start from the bottom to then go up and showcase that your ideas are working. So yes, it was an amazing episode. And as always, if you like this episode, feel free to share it with one friend so they can know how they can work on feature stores and they can know what it means, the end of free money in the tech world. Thank you. Yeah, so maybe you can tell me, so both of you have been at Delivery Hero for a while, right? So how has it changed since you arrived, basically?
Yeah, that's quite a bit. So yeah, I can start because I think maybe I went through so many changes. But yeah, some of them are good. Maybe we can start from, so I've been here almost 3 years now in Delivery Hero and in Berlin. And so I come from the machine learning platform background as well. And when I moved to Delivery Hero, it was kind of a similar role, but the team was sitting in Berlin and we were catering to the whole Delivery Hero. And as you might already know, we have many different companies all across the world. And we were supposed to be like this global machine learning platform team who would be building some frameworks, some tooling, so for all of the company. And it actually was going really quite good. Like we were a couple of us in the team and we had this grand vision of making so many services and everything centralized and save a lot of costs. And that's how the entire platform thing started. And yeah, it was going good for a while. And I think we were using GCP, Vertex AI, which was kind of also new at the time. And I guess Vertex pipelines / Qflow, which was, I guess, being used for us as well, which was easier for us to build. So data scientists, everyone can just add some steps and they create some pipelines and it was easy for them. Not so easy for the engineer side, but anyways, it was working. And so we catered to multiple teams. We had a fraud team, we had customer science team. We also were being used for all the other central teams. And I think there was a shift in the momentum where being central comes with its own challenges. And there are, as I said, so it's a huge company and there's so many teams. And if there's another X team which wants a different feature and then there's an Y team which wants another different feature, and we can't really prioritize easily which one to go first. And this model is kind of a tough thing to manage. And maybe we'll talk about it a lot more as we go into the actual topic of the day itself.
Yeah, we will, for sure.
So that didn't really work out, as you can expect. We tried to adopt a new model. So we are right now trying to have individual local teams develop their problems and solve the solution, and then try to build something unique and something global which all the teams can use, which I guess is the topic of the day. And so since then our global MLP. Then now I'm working as a machine learning platform engineer as well, but it's in a specific brand. As Cole mentioned, he's from logistics. I'm from Pandora, and it's basically just how we have different orgs in our huge org. And so that's a very minuscule journey of how it went for me.
Okay. Wow, that's quite a journey, though, I've got to say. I feel like, yeah, I remember chatting with you, like, I think it was 1 or 2 years ago, and then you were like, part of this global team, and you had like, this grand vision, everything was beautiful, everything was nice. And then also sometimes it felt like, like you would work on something and then another team would basically do the same. And then, I mean, now the topic of like today basically is mostly to talk about the global feature store that you have. So you said, like you had this grand vision, like a global team and everything, but then how are you then doing it again? Like, how are you doing something global again while being in Pandora, which is, I mean, maybe you can explain what it is as well, because logistics might be clear to other people. Pandora, not sure. So maybe you can start like explain what Pandora is, and then, how you're going to actually try to do a global feature store again.
Sure. I'll maybe just give some context, and then Cole can take over about how everything went and how it came to actual life, the whole planning went through. So Pandora is again a mini organization inside DH, and we have multiple markets in APAC, Europe, and of course Turkey. So we are like catering to all this almost 18 countries. And anything related to these 18 countries, product and tech, belongs to this organization called Pandora. It's just a name, which we are called, and especially us. So we are the machine learning team specific to Pandora. Basically, whatever we do is for these customers. And so there are a lot of multiple teams, but fortunately, only one machine learning platform team, at least for now. Let's see if that changes or not. I don't know. So for now, it is us, and we basically cater to the models regarding personalizations, recommendations. So whatever you see on the Foodpanda app, so Foodpanda or MX or Foodora, which I think is in Europe, so you can see the home screen, the products. So we have anything that to be done with personalization, our recommendations, is kind of coming from our team. And right, so that's the specialization we do. And of course, there's a lot of other things like analytics. There's the usual app developers also. So all these include under the Pandora tech, right? So we also have Pandora product, which of course is all of our product managers, and we have Pandora tech, which is all of our tech, right? So this is how it is structured. And I think Feature Store was one of our offerings as well, but it was just to Pandora, as you can expect.
Okay.
And I think that's when the whole thing was happening, we wanted to make this kind of a centralized service, but we don't want to repeat the same mistakes that actually happened. So that's how this idea also came to life, that the old model didn't actually work out. So we wanted to have some kind of a new model, which will actually make this Feature Store globalized. So a lot of teams can also use it. And especially because a lot of teams are already kind of either building it or they actually want to use it and they don't have enough people to actually build it. So it was like a perfect use case for us to just start and see if it makes sense or if we can actually make it work. Because, as I said, so the global is kind of tough to make it work kind of company. So that's how the idea started. And then, we started approaching all of our teams, all the other teams. We had like a huge thing about the vision and mission, because it's really important where we are headed. So that's how it started. And then, Cole can add more about what went into the planning and how getting together.
Yeah, so maybe before getting too much into global feature store, I can add a bit of context. So I'm in logistics. I've been in logistics, but logistics has changed a lot also over the time I've been here. And I guess we're also one of the reasons why the global grand visions didn't work out, because we have a very strong data science, machine learning organization internally with our own ways of working and opinions, which we were not very eager to use Vertex AI, for example. And we're one of many, right? It's not just us, but one of many. So we see like these kind of micro ML platforms in different areas. So yeah, in logistics, like Gottam was saying, like Pandora caters to, you said 18 countries, right? So kind of more regionally specific. Logistics caters to 15, soon to be 70 countries, but only for the logistics problems, right? So we don't do any recommendations, personalization like Gottam does. That's all distributed out elsewhere. But we do things like, when is your food going to arrive? How do we staff riders? How do we price delivery fees and stuff like this? Like the core of logistics to make the fleets more efficient. So yeah, when it comes to feature store, I think like Gottam was saying, we wanted to do things a bit differently. I think what naturally happened was, for example, in logistics, we had invested a lot into what we call live feature store, like a real-time feature store where we have Flink pipelines that aggregate streams and serve those aggregations back to the models. Whereas what Pandora had built was like a batch feature store where you go to the data warehouse, you have a SQL query, you run that once a day or maybe even once every few hours, upload that to your production like caches and stuff and serve that to the models. And so it kind of was a natural complement, right? It's like we kind of wanted batch features, but we never found the time to build it. They also wanted live features, but never found the time to build it. So we're like, okay, how do we sit together and like combine these things? And like, I think the new kind of buzzword that's going around is inner sourcing, right? So in the past, in the hypergrowth stage, whenever we saw this, like logistics was just say, okay, we're going to hire a new team. We're going to build our own batch feature store, solve it with headcount, right? Now that doesn't work as well. The economy is what it is. And so now inner sourcing is kind of the hype. So I think global feature store is one of the first examples where we're trying to really do this inner sourcing at a bigger scale, where, for example, Pandora owns the batch feature store implementation.
Mm-hmm.
They do some work to make it scalable so that other verticals can also install it in their own info, and then can also maintain it and operate it in their own departments, right? And maybe contribute back. So if we find, for our batch features, we need this kind of small tweak to what they've done, we can contribute that back and then everyone can benefit. That's the idea. So I think global feature store, like basically all the departments came together. It was a room of like 12, I think, departments with like 7 different feature store implementations.
Wow.
And we spent 3 days just saying, okay, what have you built? What have you built? What have you built? How could we somehow bring this together? So that was how it all really started coming together. It's still work in progress, of course.
Okay. No, but that's very interesting. I mean, DH is, I guess it's a bit of a different company as like, the most usual tech companies, where you also have like actually different companies inside because they got acquired. And then I guess you had like different tech as well. So like, it's also like how on your end, like how do you make it work, when like people have some very strong opinions about, no, I want to use this tech, we've always used this one. And then the others are like, no, we have to use that, it's like, how do you balance that usually at DH?
I think the real answer is you balance it at a local level, right? So in logistics, we have our opinions and we stick to them, and then other people can have other opinions, and that's fine, right? But then when you look at these global feature store, like inner sourcing initiatives, then all these opinions have to be somehow resolved. It really depends, right? There's some kind of high level opinions that are more well established across departments and verticals. But then when you get into the nitty gritty details of MLOps, then it really gets impossible to define every single design decision for every single department, right? Because our needs are so different, actually. So for feature store, I think what we ended up doing, right, was basically bringing all of these like representatives from different departments together, having like a multi-day workshop to discuss and align on like the most important details, and then kind of nominating a small committee of people who would represent and continue like making sure we're deciding on these things when we need to, and try to get like some POCs and MVPs working that actually scale across multiple departments.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. It really sounds like, I mean, not like to compare it to like politics, you have like people coming and they all like gather and meet and then they talk and, and then you do like other things. I find it quite interesting, to be honest. And, but yeah, and so like, it sounds like also it's really like a very bottom up approach, where like actually, like someone would be like, okay, we need that. Then you build it and then actually you show that it works. And then maybe other teams want to join in. It's more like, I guess before, and Gottam, maybe tell me if I'm wrong, but before was more like, from the top to the bottom, like you had like the central team, which was the one, to be like, okay, we are central team. Hey, everyone has to do that. Whereas now it sounds like more like, okay, we have this need. We're going to build it. Look, it works. Then you showcase it to other people. And then they actually, oh, okay, it's cool. Is it like how it works now, you would say?
it's in kind of a middle. So before it, we had a lot of teams. So it's basically about getting what features are present. And as I said, it was kind of like a pilot program. So we didn't really have so many features, but the main requirement was we need to deploy models. So that's the huge need at the time, because the teams at least we are catering to had no engineer, and which kind of makes us easier because we are the only engineers who will be taking any decisions. And it's usually the other teams who are just data scientists, and they want just to deploy their models, which they were not able to before we actually came along. And all that they wanted is to deploy, and what we had to do, we just did it. And as I said, so we were using GCP Vertex pipelines, which is essentially Qflow, and just trying to figure out how to make this easier for data scientists. It was not, but then that was easiest that could have been done. And as I said, so the things kind of changed, and so we were still in hyper growth at the time. This was way back in 2021 and 22, and we were still like in this hyper growth. And then the teams were like, okay, then we got flooded with all these requests, right? And now we can't really do or prioritize one team over another. It's kind of an uphill battle. So the teams just decided they just hire an engineer, and that's the easiest solution than just to wait until the platform team delivers a feature.
Yeah.
Kind of makes sense. I understand that, okay, not everything can be carried, especially when we start from the scratch, and every little team has their own very little specific features. That's how it actually went haywire. Like every team had starting to have their own engineers, and they had their own opinions. So we couldn't come into an agreement with the other engineers. Now we are in different teams, right? So as a platform team, we view things a little differently, because we had to all the teams versus the specific engineer in the team where they just want to solve their problem, and then that's it. They don't care about anything else. Well, this everything kind of led to where we are right now. So the global feature store you take for an example. So it kind of is a similar problem if you see about it, and on a larger scale, because right now it was only multiple teams before. And when we started this whole discussion about feature store, it's multiple departments across whole company. And there were a lot of, again,
it's impossible for everyone to agree anyway, right?
It's like,
so it was like I was personally scared inside that, okay, I mean, it's a really amazing thing to build this, and what if the same problems might happen, but fortunately not, because this time there was no hyper growth, so we kind of are sure there's not going to be just a fallback that, okay, I mean, if this doesn't work out, there's a fallback. So no, so we have to do it, especially because there's so many benefits that we can reap, and also there's something already there. It's all about us coming to a room, talking about how we can build this tool so that all the teams can use it.
But we have to actually find a solution, right? There's no more hiring more people, so
yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, that's how it was able to come to this level, right? And it's also not about just get everything together, pieces from Pandora, pieces from logistics, and just stitch it and just create a monster like a Frankenstein monster. No, so it has to be a proper solution. If not, I don't think all of our engineers would be agreeing to even start this. And fortunately, after long RFCs and discussions, right now there is a state where I think everyone accepts, and actually it's really good. It's really good, where it's not like logistics has, let's say, the streaming and the live, and we have the batch, and then there's something coming from the global. So we are all trying to match this and stitch this together in a really clean way. And of course, there are some compromises and decisions which are really tough, and few will take time to build. But then if you see it in the longer term, and if you see there's one global solution being used by all the company, and also the local teams have some, if they want to develop some small feature relating to them, it's inner sourced, which makes it even more impressive that, okay, if I want to build something for Pandora, I can do it. And I need to make sure it's not gonna break. And we do have a model about how all this reviews goes on, which was again a huge discussion about how we who will review them, who's gonna take this decision if there's something big that's gonna change.
Who's the owner of it,
Yeah, I think that's I'm not sure. Cole mentioned there was this workshop for 3 whole days just to decide all this, just how many feature stores are there, what we need to build and how we'll be building. That's it. That's whole 3 days. And I think it was really fruitful from all those discussions. I think, a lot of things came out, especially the whole vision and mission statement. So it's not about the short-term how, but the longer term. And we'll see.
Yeah, one interesting tidbit from those 4 days where you bring so many different people together was like, I found very interesting just discussions where after one full day of discussions, we're like, wait a second, we don't even agree on the basics, right? Like, what is actually the definition of a feature? What is the definition of a feature store? Like, people had just different conceptions and different implementations, and it was confusing just communication, right? Like, just as an example, right? And we really have to go back to basics and be like, okay, let's agree on something here. Like, okay, this is what we mean when we say feature. Like, exactly this and nothing more, nothing less, right? And also feature store. Then we discovered, okay, there's many different ways to think about a feature store, right? There's like virtual feature stores, physical feature stores, this and that, which none of us were experts on, but we all had kind of wandered into one specific state of mind about it, and then we had to consolidate that together. So that was also really interesting.
Yeah, I feel like, it's usually the case when people always like feature store first. I've had this experience in the past as well in my previous job where, data scientists come and they're like, I want a feature store. First, they all want a feature store. Because Uber published, an article, and then it's like, man, we all want this feature store, and then it's like, okay, but do you actually need it? Also, can you actually use the features? And for us, it was also like the same, like, it was like, okay, what's a feature? First, what's a feature store? Then what's a feature? So what's a feature then at DH then? First, what's a feature store, and then what's the feature that you have?
Yeah, so I think for
another 3 days, damn.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, like, a feature should be essentially one column or data point if you think of like a table view, right? So that's a single feature. And that feature should be usable by multiple consumers. That's like the big idea, right? And the feature store is kind of the whole engine that moves data around from where the data is computed to where it's served to models. And I think the way we're going with feature store, the feature store also is kind of an orchestrator, you can think of it, right? Like the data, like we have a data platform. We don't want to reinvent data platform. So that the features are computed in a data platform. Because some people think, like, my original idea is feature store is like, well, to build a feature, I need SQL files, right? So the definition of the feature is a SQL file. So it's like, no. Actually, that's the data platform's job. The feature store is just to move the computed feature into inference time. So the feature is more like the metadata around what does the model need to know to access this feature in both batch and online.
Okay.
And the actual computation of the feature is kind of something else entirely, which we extracted out.
Okay. And then so when you're training the model, is it also like, do you also use those features from the feature store? Or when you train, it's just from the data platform?
We should, exactly. The feature store should provide kind of a SDK for both offline and online. So when you train the model, you can say use the offline SDK, and that SDK somehow gets the features for you. It will end up fetching the features from the data platform, right? Like the storage is always going to be in our data warehouse. We're not going to invent a new storage layer when the data warehouse exists.
I hope not.
So it's just like a virtual layer on top, right? It knows where to find the feature in the data warehouse, you can say.
Okay. And so now you have like a feature store with some features. So have you actually seen an improvement delivery here with like then using a feature store and then also like agreeing, on like the definitions and like maybe how to use it and how to add new features? Have you seen some improvement there?
Yeah, I think talking about improvement, so we know using feature store, and we already seen all the models we just talked about, especially also from Pandora and logistics, we can add Cole. So we already seen a huge benefit having a feature store, hence the whole point of having global feature store, right? So if there was no value, I'm pretty sure it would not have happened. And so especially before we are using models without any kind of features, and then even just using batch is giving so much value. And if you imagine actually using the live features, which I think we'll be doing very, very soon, it should give us a lot of value out of it, especially driving the business. For us, it's important because when I say personalization and recommendations, and when we don't have real-time serving for the features, and we are only doing right now, it's only on the batch, as we already talked about.
And what's the batch time? Was it like a couple of minutes, or what is it?
Now we have, like, Based on the model, we have different times when we generate these features, but it's not exactly real time, right? And we seeing all this batch features already providing so much value. And we also want to build some streaming solution around it, which is in progress. And there seems to be a lot of value. I think once we go live, we'll have actual numbers, but then before there, we do see a lot of like the data scientists when they propose the whole thing that, okay, we do want to use this stream features. You know what? This is the amount of money we might drive. You know, this is the basis for even actually starting to work on this right now, and especially from the global feature store standpoint. So logistics already has streaming, for example, right? And we don't.
Okay.
And the whole point of right now doing global feature store is if we can actually reuse what logistics already have, and we don't, that saves a lot of engineering effort, which just keeps adding value to how much money we can actually produce from the actual application itself, right? So all this adds together, and yeah, that's where we are headed to. And right now, all I can say is there is a lot of value for feature store. It's just gonna be just increasing a lot more. And for global feature store, it's still in an MVP stage. We kind of arrived at the conclusion when it should be done. So by November, maybe we'll have another forecast. I don't know, but by November is when we plan to have like an MVP of the global feature store.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have to see how the actual value would be looking like.
Okay, but it seems promising already. And yeah, I also have a follow-up question to that. So you, like, when you create the features, how do people discover the features actually? Because I guess for you, you've been working on it for so long that it's obvious, but like, how do you make sure that people, not recreate a similar feature with like different name, or the same one with a different name, or like, how do you make sure of that?
Yeah, I can start a bit, and then yeah, Cole, you can add. So for us especially, so we have built our feature store based on the Feast, the open source. And Feast fortunately gives some kind of a UI, which is super basic, but not really that amazing that, okay, something's going to be missed. You can kind of find it.
Yeah.
But that's the starting point, right? So we were not initially putting so much effort into feature discoverability, I think, which was a biggest mistake, because now, especially in global feature store, we are looking at that. We have a way on how to create the features. We are trying to look at discoverability part, because it's super important, especially when the customer base like us will be increasing so much. And there are some solutions in mind. So we are planning to use some internal product. I'm not really sure if that's gonna work out, to be honest. And yeah, or maybe we'll have something custom, especially now, because this is a good part of the GFS, like global feature store, right? So there's another team who really, really needs UI and all of these features you just mentioned, right? And for example, Pandora doesn't need it, but they want it. They can already develop it for us as well, so that we don't need to, or okay, you know what, now we are done with the batch. Okay, let's work on feature discoverability. No, because there's another team already doing it, and they're just going to contribute it to global feature store, and then we are just reaping the benefit. So we are not spending time. This is how, like, if you see about it, like if you think about it, any feature request you kind of ask me right now, it will be catered by someone in this company, but they'll ultimately everyone reaps benefits. So that's the model. Right?
I mean, that sounds amazing, but it's also like, how do you deal with the ego of people and stuff? Because, sometimes it's like, yeah, what you built is a UI, but it's like, how do you also like deal with that? Or like, I don't know, maybe at the ATS people have like, usually like, now they got it that, you have to maybe sometimes accept things if they're not your way. Or like, yeah, how do you also like deal with that?
Yeah, I think that's a challenge, especially with global feature store, because to be honest, I didn't know these people 4 months ago, right? These are like fresh faces to me, right? Like, I know the egos of logistics. I've learned how to deal with them, but then these are like fresh egos, right? And not saying they're bad. Everyone has a little bit of ego, right? Me too.
Exactly.
And I think what worked for us in the end was just to like really be pragmatic and say, okay, like put a nail on discussions where it's like, but optimally, Redis is bad for this and this reason, and maybe there's a vector DB, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, look around the room. Who's using Redis right now? 90%. Okay, Redis works. Just use Redis, right? Let's start there. We can add more later, right? So like being pragmatic and like looking at, okay, what actually works? What do we actually have evidence for? And using like data ultimately to make decisions. I think this is what was most impactful, because in the room, someone had built a UI before. Someone had built a really nice catalog before, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm kind of similar to Gottam's style of feature store. So we're like super technical. We don't really need a UI. Like, people want to write their SQL and write like really complex SQL and get their really custom feature in production. And the number of features we're supporting is relatively small, right? We're not in the hundreds or thousands of features, but there's other departments that are really catering for like ops or something like this, where the features are very, very simple, like this count divided by that count. They want to do it purely through UI. And the scale of features is much, much bigger because of that, right? It's like a completely different target user in the end. And so they have a stronger need for a UI, for even like on-the-fly computations, which we've never done, for having a feature catalog. So yeah, it's just different perspectives on what the goal of the feature store is, which also ties into the ego question, because then it's like, okay, you want ops to be happy, I want data scientists to be happy, we have to meet in the middle somehow. That's a bit difficult. But yeah, I think ultimately we look at what works, and then we just try to find, like, is there a way to cater to both needs at the same time? Is there a way to kind of compromise? And in the worst case, you have a few executives sponsoring the whole thing, and they can put the hammer down and like can make sure things don't go off the rails.
And then you're still like, whatever. Like, we'll discard that and we'll use Redis. So, but I mean, it's also a good idea. I feel like sometimes, software engineers can also, be like very, very specific about what they want. But then it's like, like, okay, maybe if you want to use these very new cool things, like Vertex AI back then, and then, but like the rest is like, maybe not. And then can also be like a big success or failure as well, basically, like Redis. I mean, Redis just works for those. It's like, it's kind of made for that. And maybe it's not the best thing for like 100% of it, but then if it does like 80% of the job already, that can be the cool part.
Yeah, but that's the best thing. So right now we just picked Redis because that's the most used. But the way we are trying to build the global feature store is like later on it just supports anything, right? So it's not limited to Redis. It's just the one we are starting with. Then it's basically true for any component. So we want to keep it cloud agnostic, component agnostic. So whatever you want to build in the later feature. And this also helps us to be more proactive. I mean, imagine later on some organization, like some data scientist in random department comes and say, okay, now I want to use UI. And for example, they come in Pandora and they tell, okay, I need a UI. I think that's way better. Now we don't need to think too much about building from now and, okay, plan it, take like 1 month, 2 months, and then release the feature. Right now it's with the global feature store, it's already available. Then, you just need to deploy it and done, right? So it serves us on so many multiple levels. And yeah, that's how we are trying to take it forward as a long-term vision.
Yeah. No, but it's cool as well. I mean, I guess it's nice also for you that you can see the difference, that now you also have like the support of other teams as well, instead of, being like the mean guy, kind of, or like being the one like, forcing everyone to be like, no, you have to use that. I guess that's also like a good part. And yeah, you've been talking about like, like creating features or maybe creating features of the UI, but also how do you test those? Like, do you have a way to like, I guess, also when you hire new people, maybe they have to be onboarded, obviously. Like, how do you make sure that, they can be onboarded successfully? And then how do you also make sure that you can test those features, before releasing them? So you make sure that nothing's broken.
I mean, I can only really talk about our logistics experience with live features, which this is honestly the hardest part. Like with batch features, I'm envious because it's like,
life
you
is
compute
easy,
it once and then you just upload, right? Upload to the cloud and you're done. But it's like, for us, it's like, no.
Easy,
But that's also why they have so much cool stuff that we don't have, like feature catalogs and UIs and things, because we just don't have time for that. But like in streaming, it's a nightmare because essentially you have 2 data sources, because you need like 6 months of historical data to train your model in the first place. And you're not going to get that out of a Kafka stream. Like, it's just, we're not going to store data in Kafka for that long for multiple reasons. Even if we did, we couldn't access it for model training very easily. Yeah. So then you have like some kind of mirrored data source in your data warehouse, which hopefully matches Kafka. But does it really? We never know. We have to check that. So we have like multiple levels of checks and like QA, what we call like data consistency checks, right? So we check the data sources one by one. Every data source we onboard, is it consistent? Is it at least 99% consistent? 95% consistent? Like, what's the threshold? And then for every feature we build. We also run it once in the offline mode, then we deploy it to a shadow environment. We wait a day, we collect the logs from the online version, like compare those, like do a full cross join or full join, and compare the online and offline version and really check how consistent is the data, right? And it's never 100%. It's impossible.
Yeah, of course.
Because also the computation engines are different, like Flink and BigQuery in our case, sometimes don't always match up perfectly. So yeah, that's how we solve it. It's just a lot of writing a lot of like consistency checks as queries and joins and things like this, trying to make that as easy to rerun, reproducible, automate all the schedules and stuff like this to keep an eye on things. But yeah, that's honestly the hardest part, and I think it's where we spent a lot of time, but we haven't scaled it so it's like super easy, right? It's kind of a case-by-case basis for us. I think that's where we want to move to, though, is to find a way, how do we scale those quality checks in a more general way? Because I think that's what other departments would need if they want to use our feature setup as well. Right.
Yeah, I mean, especially as you said, for live feature, so it's very tricky. Because, you can't just check it from the day of yesterday. You have to check everything at the same time. So do you also have some real-time alerts, for example, if something is really wrong? Or it's more you check at the end of the day, or it's automatically checked at the end of the day and then you receive an alert being hey, by the way, look at that.
Of course, we have some real-time alerts, but not exactly for data consistency. So data consistency, we check, we're comparing to historical data. So we're usually waiting for our data warehouse to update, doing it once per day, for example. But the real-time alerts are more all the other stuff. Are the Flink jobs running? Checkpointing, is it running? Is the latency good? Do we have Kafka lag, consumer lag popping up in different places? So all of that stuff, make sure all the systems are running. And then for the actual data quality checks, we do that in a more offline manner.
And what about you, Gottam? How is it in the easy life part, the batch part?
Well, as a thing, when it seems easy, that's where there's so many things that can go wrong. And so as you can expect, there's a bunch of stuff we were able to build because it's not really complex as streaming. So yeah, we kind of have SQL transformations, Python transformations. We have a lot of data quality, data drift checks.
Yes.
So yeah, we do track them and send them alerts whenever there's some bad data that enters and that you're transforming. So we just send them before, so the bad data doesn't propagate forward. So as you know, bad data, bad model, bad prediction. So we don't want that. So these are already taken care of. I think that's again the best part because now we can ship them to all the other departments, right? So yeah, so we don't really face a lot of issues as much as probably as streaming because nothing really is real time. So majority of them we either deal during the day and mostly it's happening on BigQuery and we are kind of okay seeing not many issues.
Yes.
It's just, so for us, the most difficult part right now is to tracking all these jobs because our DAX, so we use Airflow for all this orchestration.
Okay.
And when we started, it was kind of easier because we had very few features, and now we are having almost close to 2,000 to 3,000 features, and you probably can't imagine how messed up the DAX would be looking like. And if something fails now, it's super difficult to track from the task to the BigQuery job to the actual data itself. So now it's getting a little difficult, and so we need to think few more about, okay, how do we actually grab this in a clear way? Because before there was a lot of time to solve this. Okay, take a day or two, it's still okay. But now as we move forward, especially also when you think about global feature store, we need to have proper tech in place that, okay, if something is failing, we need to know fast because there are some teams who are doing really critical business use cases and we don't want to spend time thinking, look, there's a black box and you kind of don't know what's failing where, and you know what, tough luck. So we don't want to do that. And
and also, I mean, if you do that as well, points your week will just be debugging features, so, which is also not very fun. In my previous job, I was a YAML engineer, when Kubernetes cluster is not working at one point. And you're spend 3 days in the nodes and pods and, checking whatever. That's also not really fun. And so you said you were in Airflow and BigQuery at the moment. So you have DAGs running, and then other features computed per country, or how does it work usually, or it just depends on the feature?
Yeah, it's kind of pretty flexible about how you wanna design your tag. We have some conflicts, so it can be per country wise. So we usually have it per country, which kind of makes sense. And everything's trained per country. Even the models, everything is per country, as you would probably expect. And so all the features are available as partitioned by the country as well again, so that you can use them while training and serving as well. But so this is how we structure it. And it probably might change, not sure. But we also have one other service which we probably didn't discuss. So we do have live, but not exactly live. So we have a feature store which we use for Redus, but then we don't really update Redus like really frequently. It's again maybe a day, once per day. So it's not technically real time, but it's still live features. But as I said, so it's nothing super complex as of now. So we do really want to move to streaming. So we are working on streaming right now.
Okay.
And now that I hear about all the experiences with the streaming, it's a bit of
I'm not sure there.
But then, that's the good thing again. So since it's complex, we are getting a lot of value out of it. And since logistics already has this experience, we are going to share this experience and, try to at least not be way too scared, because now we are not going into the unknown. There's someone already there and we'll tag along. So we are not going blind into the stuff. So
yeah, that's the good part though, is that you can actually learn from like other people. And it's more like, I guess for you, like, when you're really like part of the platform team, you were like, kind of always going into the unknown, and then people wait on you, kind of. Either they wait on you or they just do it on their own, which is like very different. So like, no, I guess it's like, for you, it's better, like, just be like, yeah, actually, I can just have a chat with them and then learn from them, right?
Yeah, that's the best part. So every team has their unknowns and we are just filling in the gaps so that, everyone's just reaching the goal faster.
Mm-hmm. Okay, no, but that's really, really cool. And so, what is then the future vision for the, global feature store? Is it going to be like one of those, this EaseKCD meme and the standards? So we have like yet another standard. So it's like yet another feature store? Or what's the future is like? You said already, like, you're going to scale it up. You're going to like unify it a bit. Also like inner sourcing as well, what you mentioned in the past. But like, is there like other things as well that you want to work on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the short term will be the XKCD meme, right? Like, we will have to add a new standard and hope and work to make it work, right? So, I mean, concretely, there's already the first POC, let's say, with one specific department ongoing, right? And so that department is also committing some engineering resources to figure out the first steps, right? So we're kind of waiting on the sidelines because live is like a layer on top of batch. Like, get all the batch stuff right and we'll add our stuff on top is kind of our strategy. So logistics is we're involved, but kind of waiting a bit. But let's see. I think we'll have to go department by department and prove that it actually works. If they have an existing feature store, we need to prove that we can replace that feature store, which is also going to be a huge challenge, right? Like, this is, I think, the hardest part. Like, what you and Gottam were talking about before, right? If you're starting with a team who has no engineers, has a new use case, like, this is honestly the easiest way to get adoption on this kind of platform tooling. Even inside logistics, we have the same problem where we have people who have Airflow DAGs that have been running for years. And I wasn't even in the company when they were created. And now we've moved on and we have better tooling. And it's like, okay, we should use our tooling, right? And they're like, maybe, but like, how? And like, do I have time to migrate my things? I don't know. So yeah, I think Feature Store will face the same problem where every department needs to kind of prove that it's worth it for them to onboard to this. It provides value to them. So I think what will have to happen, right, is we have to actually combine these different features. So like, we need a batch feature store. So I will only adopt it in logistics if you provide me batch and feature catalog and these kind of nice things. So then maybe for another department, they have all that already. And what they really need is live. So then they're only going to adopt once we add the live on top of it as well, right? So I think we'll have to go department by department based on their needs, keep adding features until it gets into that full vision. And then hopefully we start also removing the old standards.
Some standards.
Some old standards at least. Yeah, that's the hardest part. So that's the part I think we'll have to see how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a hard one. And also like to add to that is like, do you have, like, you mentioned Google Cloud since the beginning basically, so I guess that's what you're using. But is it like, do you also have like other cloud providers? Because, you have like different companies, so then how does it work for them?
Yeah, I mean, so the last I've heard, I think at least the logistics standard is AWS for production workloads, GCP for data offsite workloads. That's kind of our standard. So we do both clouds.
Okay.
I know there's some departments that have used GCP for everything, but at least our data warehouse is GCP. So everyone has GCP for data warehouse with some small exceptions, but they're moving. But yeah, I don't know. I don't remember which departments were using GCP for production workloads and if they're actually moving to AWS or what the timeline would be for that, because it's a complex transition. But that's another level of variance, right? So then if you think about, okay, we want to deploy the global feature store, it's like, well, it needs to actually be compatible with both GCP and AWS for all departments to adopt it as well.
Yeah, I can shed more light on that we are not going to AWS. So we were one of those ones where everything was on GCP, and we plan to do that. And yeah, but yeah, that shouldn't be a biggest problem for us anyways, at least for now, because we are trying to be cloud agnostic. So all the components at least should be deployable everywhere. So it's usually your Terraform modules or all the components are kind of compatible. So yeah, unless there's a specific offering that only comes from one cloud provider that we have to support, which I don't think is there as of now. Until then, I think we are okay. But as I said, so whatever we are talking about, so until we are done with the batch, which is this year, and then we move to the streaming, which is next year probably. And until we have a proper global feature store established, we wouldn't really know what's going to happen. And we are positive on the outlook, like how the whole long-term vision looks like. And once we have a success this year with the batch, I think we'll be on an amazing path towards that.
Cool. Oh, that sounds cool. Okay, well, I think, yeah, we're going to come close to like the end now. So do you guys have any ending thoughts maybe to like end on this amazing Feature Store podcast?
Yeah, I'll just start a couple more because I already, the ones I was talking was kind of ending thoughts. But yeah, so just to reiterate, so this whole initiative I think is very relevant for especially the companies who are structured like Delivery Hero. There's central teams and then there's so many local teams. And it's basically about how you strike this right balance between all this centralized and decentralized solution, but also try to support the innovation, because this is very, very critical. When you see about local teams developing their own stuff, they're in silos, and then there's central teams who doesn't really listen or talk much about local teams, and they build something which no one's going to use it from the local. So we want to eliminate all these boundaries and also have a nice solution, not something as we discussed like a Frankenstein monster. So no one can actually use it, or it's just super complex to use. So it's a super complex problem, and think that's why we are also enjoying solving this. And of course, there are a few non-technical problems which, I think Cole will be facing more than me, I guess. But yeah, so this is like the whole vision, and I personally am really happy to see where it's going. And I think we already talked too much about the benefits, and there are pitfalls. But I think I'm really confident that we, as the whole team, I think whoever I met is amazing. So pretty sure we'll be going.
Cool. What about you, Cole?
Yeah, I think kind of in the same direction of things. I don't know. For me, I think the biggest learning, and not just with the feature store, but also the work we're doing inside logistics on other ML platform topics, right, is like how difficult it really is to scale platform tooling in an organization. I think, I don't know, if people don't have experience with that, I think it's just something that might be quite interesting to realize, is that it's not as easy as, like you said, just develop a new standard, deploy your new system, and everyone will adopt it, right? There's 1,000 different considerations. People are always fighting for, do I have enough time and capacity and priority to work on adopting your tooling, learning how it works? And usually also there's this siloing problem where you built some grand vision, but actually you didn't really know what people really needed. And so you solved maybe 70% of what they needed, but the 30% that's really important, you kind of missed out on, right? And then that's something that's really easy to overlook. So yeah, these are like the really interesting kind of challenges that I see. And especially with, you have existing systems, existing status quo that you need to improve on and replace. I think that's kind of a really big challenge here for global feature store or anything like this. So yeah, I don't have like the perfect solution to how to address those things, but we're learning as we go. And it's been interesting, and I'm pretty hopeful that we'll navigate it.
Yeah,
Over
but
time.
as I said, we are in this together, so let's just go for it.
Cool. Yes. Well, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for joining the podcast. That was a very, very interesting one. Thank you very much. Like, even I'm hyped about like what you're building at ZH and the feature store and everything. So that sounds really cool. So, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.